Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, amazing people all around the world. And today I have another amazing person from around the world. He's currently in London, and he is an amazing film director. He's with the Directors Guild of America, the Writers Guild of America, has contributed 100 feature films. This man's amazing. So it's my great honor to introduce Mr. Stephen Bernstein. Steve, welcome to the show today.
My great pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for joining me. So let's kick things off, and I'll ask you first. I ask everybody same question: what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Not logical at all, and entirely logical at the same time. I started, years ago at the BBC and was trained on their very prestigious and rather wonderful writing and directing program, and I learned to write in the way that they write. But by some odd accident in London in those times, there was evolving a new genre where uh, pop singers and rock bands wanted to get exposure to things called A&R men, people who were for record companies whose job it was to find new and emerging artists. And they couldn't get through the door. They would hope that these guys would come or these girls would come to their gigs, and they wouldn't. So someone had the idea, wouldn't it be a great idea if you filmed bands on either 16 millimeter or on the then emerging three-quarter inch video, and then supply those to the record companies. They could see the bands and then decide who they were going to get. And those very rudimentary early videos, very often shot against a white sheet, then emerged into the music videos that we know today. So we started by doing things in a little basement on Darby Street here in London. And a year and a half later, there were music videos being done for £1.5 million for Duran Duran, Tears for Fears, Eurythmics, and so on. And I was there shooting most of those videos, or a great many, hundreds of them, and practicing a new skill set, which was cinematography, because I had the access to the BBC cameras. Not sure if the BBC knew that I had access to those cameras, but I did. Borrowed them on weekends and shot lots of music videos. And that led to commercials with RSA, which is Ridley Scott's company, and then with Tony Kaye. And the commercials I shot were kind of legendary, won lots of awards, and that led to feature films like, as a cinematographer, like Water for Chocolate, which is the highest grossing foreign language film of all time in America. Of course, Monster, which won the Oscar. Of course, White Chicks, which everyone asks me about. The early films of Noah Baumbach, huge films like SWAT, Dolores Claiborne, comedies like Half Baked and Waterboy, and Scary Movie, and then lots of other things. That led in turn to me going back to where I began, which was as a director. And I did a film called Decoding Annie Parker with Helen Hunt, Samantha Morton, Aaron Paul, which won a great many awards. That led to Dominion, called Last Call in America, with my friend John Malkovich, Rodrigo Santoro, Risa Fons, which also got a great deal of recognition. And that led to my new film, GRQ, which just came out, just about to come out, I should say, early next year, based on the novel that I wrote, which came out earlier this year and was kind of this very odd phenomena. I never fancied myself a novelist and didn't think that I had the capacity to have the success that for some reason, and don't ask me, if you're going to ask me, which you probably will, why the book's so successful. I'm not surely cognizant of what notes it hit or what it touched on that made it so very popular. Certainly, it talks a great deal about blockchain and crypto. It talks about the human need for success. It talks about greed and lying and a bunch of other things. But we didn't know it would win a Literary Titan Award, sells many copies it has, all these 5 stars on Amazon. We did not anticipate, though I write a great deal. I write screenplays, of course, for feature films, and I write books and I direct theater. I did not see this having the phenomena it was going to become. So a very long answer to your short question. Um, did the antecedents really anticipate where I am now? No, I went off on different journeys as cinematographer, as writer, as playwright, lots of different careers. But I would say that had I not done all those various things and worked on those movies, I wouldn't have become the person or writer that I am now. So I guess looking backwards, it seems to be logical. But when I was 20, if you asked me if I could have anticipated where this road would lead, I would not have been able to anticipate it.
I like that. That answer makes a lot of sense to me because I worked in finance technology in corporate America for 20 years. In the past several years, I've been an author. So, and a podcaster. So it makes all the sense in the world. So,
Yeah, if you say so. I'll take your word for it. Yeah.
I my first job at a college in 1994 was a movie theater manager, and I remember Dolores Claiborne very well. And we had other
Thank you.
hot movies that came out, but that was always the one that filled the biggest stadium, the biggest auditorium. So it was a
Glad to hear
good
it.
movie. So,
Yeah.
so from behind the camera, right? How have you been successful, like, involved in blockchain, right? How have you been successful at spearheading tangible infrastructure change within the global creative industry?
Well, it's interesting because particularly with this new film, GRQ, we are experimenting with wholly different ways of marketing the film because the landscape has changed dramatically. We have a great problem in the film industry, which is when we monitorize how our revenue streams can actually get back to us, the creators. And quite frankly, it doesn't. You would be amazed and shocked at our naivete. Now, we have a problem also in the industry that everyone thinks people in the film industry are kind of stupid and they can bring their business acumen onto the film industry and explain to us how things should really be done. People think films are too expensive. They're not. They're as expensive as they has to be. There's lots of reason we use big crews, mainly because there's such a concentration of expenditure over a short period of time that you can't afford errors. So if the idea is that you come out with a small crew of 12 people and you make a film and everyone's doing two or three jobs, you're going to fail because one of those jobs that those people are doing, they're going to do poorly. And if you make a mistake when you're shooting something only in a matter of months, when you're spending millions of dollars, that mistake is going to be catastrophic. So you have to have big crews. They have to be highly skilled crews. And then, of course, you've got to find your way in a saturated marketplace so that people will find your film and see it. And there's so much product right now because of the digital revolution that anybody with a camera and an inclination who's seen a couple of movies thinks they're film directors, bless them. And so Sundance last year, which is a very important festival, we use festivals as platforms to market our films, had 7,000 films sent to them for about 100 places. So getting found in that marketplace is very, very hard. But then this is where blockchain becomes interesting. The film is found by a distributor, and they sell to people called exhibitors, the people who show it at your local cinema. And then, of course, you've got your streamers as well who also show it. Those revenues are very difficult to audit, if not impossible, because you're not only selling to the US, you're selling internationally to some 78 different international markets. And in each of those markets, there's different distributors that you may or may not have worked with in the past. And those distributors then report to your foreign sales agents. And the foreign sales agents really have no way of auditing those either. So you have all these different machinations and channels, all these different revenues going to different places, and generally not getting back to the creators, almost never getting back to creators. Here's a rule. You do a film for 10 million, you're probably going to spend 10 million in marketing. You're probably going to have to do 30 million in sales for the film to get past what the exhibitor is going to take, what the sales agent is going to take, what the distributor is going to take, and then back to you. And you don't know if that reporting is going to be honest. This is how far it's gone. With foreign sales, we get something called MGs, minimum guarantees. You sell your film to, say, France. They say they're going to give you $100,000 for your movie. The minimum guarantee is they give you that 100,000, and then anything they earn will come on top of it. Well, remarkably, the almost thing you only ever see is your minimum guarantee and nothing else. Now, either that means those films are underperforming in every single market in the world, or very cynical distributors and exhibitors simply aren't passing you back that revenue. Great example of that is when I did Monster, which made over $100 million. We shot it for under $3 million. Part of my deal, madly, was participation in the back end. The amount of money I've gotten back from Monster, $0. Made 100 million, we did it for 3 million. Now, I'm not saying the distributors, the exhibitors, the producers, anyone's dishonest. Please save me from a lawsuit and also save me from misrepresentation. I think everyone's entirely honest, but just the way the industry's set up, there's no direct connection between the creators and the revenue streams. Now, the potential in blockchain is simply breathtaking. And to my mind, blockchain was designed for the film industry. So when you have an IP, and that's what I create screenplays, books, films. These are all valuable IPs. And now with the ability to connect that to a blockchain and the fact that a piece of every sale, and it can't be altered, as we all know, that will come back to me as part of the revenue is revolutionary in the film industry. Revolutionary, except that we haven't seen a general application of this idea. Everyone talks about blockchain and crypto, but very few people in the film industry are utilizing it. However, we plan to. So we've been speaking to the out of Vortex. We haven't made a deal with them yet, but Sonic has been very valuable in providing insight into uh, these applications, and other specialists. And we plan to partially release the film via blockchain connections so that we can make sure that the revenue for the film comes back to us. The other remarkable thing that we're doing as part of our marketing campaign, because the film GRQ, based on the book GRQ, is about people wanting to get rich quick. And we thought it would be a great idea if we had a campaign built around one of these blockchain companies where we would have a treasure hunt that people would look for clues in my book. And again, the book's called GRQ if people want to get in early on the treasure hunt, or in the film, or on NFTs that we're going to put on on these blockchain platforms. And each of the NFTs will provide a clue as to where a treasure that we've created, a $250,000 piece of jewelry designed by Carolyn Rodney, a famous jewelry designer in Los Angeles, will be buried. Be buried in a place and a time virtual because someone did something similar in the UK. And what followed, followed a book called Masquerade. Most of the green grass in UK was dug up as people tried to figure out where this treasure was buried. So we're going to virtually bury it, provide people clues via NFTs that they can purchase and trade as they can on those marketplaces. Can also find clues on scratch-off cards in the back of the book. Can also find clues inside the film when they see the film, and then put together all the clues that will guide them to where this treasure is buried and when it was buried. The first person to solve that puzzle gets a $250,000 prize. And we're using blockchain for that marketing. And we're going to do a blockchain release on a blockchain platform, in addition to the theatrical release. So we think it's revolutionary, but we don't understand why it's revolutionary. Because as I say, because of the confusion about the way revenue is distributed in the film industry, blockchain almost was designed for my world.
I love it. I love that treasure hunt. I need to be the first person that sees your movie here. You know, so
Well, I'll tell
uh,
you what, I'll send you, if you're serious, I'll send you a link to it. And then we can work together. And we want as many people involved as possible. We're very excited by this process for two reasons. One is that, I think it's a great opportunity to protect the revenue stream. So it actually comes back to the creators. But I also think there's a huge potential here because the industry has been in decline. As a lot of people may know, the streamers discovered that their model was a faulty model. And the model was this. Netflix first decided to try to corner a market, as people have tried to do with silver and other things in the past. And they thought that they could get all the films on their platform, which they didn't. And then they had some competition, which subverted their model. And they also thought they could make films with the revenue they were getting, because they had a huge cash flow edge, but not a lot of profits. What they discovered was films cost millions and millions of dollars to make. And when you're selling subscriptions, you're never going to generate enough revenue to cover all those films and then provide the films on your platform for free. You could initially when you're trying to corner the market, but there was always, I think, an intention in their mind to transition into pay-per-view, which they never did. And then suddenly we had a writer's strike last year. They had a saturation of market and they had competition and they weren't making profits. They tried to get the unions to cooperate and reduce their rates. Unions said, why should we do this? You're making lots of money, not lots of profit, but lots of revenue. Um, so they couldn't find a wedge that way. So now they're trying to transition into pay-per-view, but in the meantime, they've cut way back on production, particularly dramatic production, because it's cheaper to do game shows or sports, but not movies because they cost too much, and you can't really see a revenue stream from them like within these other things, which generate more money for less production costs. So for all those reasons, uh, the streamers have no longer become a source of potential production budgets for us, and we've got to find a different way of not only generating revenue but getting money back. And that's why blockchain, I think, is the future for the entire motion picture industry.
I like the gamification of the NFT applications. I am serious. If you send me the link, I can share it with my listeners and watchers of this show. And
I will absolutely will send you some previews that we did, some tests. The entire the application is how we tend to utilize it. I'll give you all those things for you to share and hopefully comment on and help guide us through this.
yeah, great, awesome, awesome. Thank you. So I want to talk about. I didn't have this on in the question list, but I want to talk about it. GRQ. A lot of people enter blockchain and crypto because they think it is get rich quick, but it is not. At least for the long-term minded investors, it is get rich slowly. Is like at least in my experience. So why this misnomer, and what should people take away from this concept of get rich quick, that maybe they should think of things a little differently?
You got right to the heart of it. Obviously, with the exception of those who invested early in Ethereum, et cetera. So yeah, there are absolute exceptions, but looking backwards is not the way necessarily to look forward, particularly with crypto and with blockchain, because the past does not add a seat into the future. This is kind of arbitrary. I talked to a lot of the early big players in crypto. I researched this project for nearly 2 years, spoke to some really fascinating people and innovators, and a lot of the original engineers and designers and all the other people that were involved in these processes, and fascinated by their take on this, as you've heard probably many times. And I got one answer from a very senior person, which I guess I can't say his name, but was in the very early days of blockchain and crypto. And he said, "Look, honestly." Um, I wish there was a specific algorithm which was predictive about when a price for a crypto coin, for example, would go up or when it would go down. But he said it is almost entirely arbitrary. Sure, there can be individual market forces at any individual time that may affect it, but it's not like a P&E is going to give you an insight into a crypto. And it's based in part on kind of a collective hysteria here used in a non-pejorative way, just what people's impulses are at any individual time about what becomes popular. And then he said something that was significant and led to my writing the book. He said, to his mind, that's emblematic, really, of how people think anyway, which is that the future is a happy accident, and you've got to position yourself in that happy accident. We talked about why people play the lottery, for example, and he said, logically, if you look at the psychology of it, your chances of winning the lottery are virtually zero. The chances of you losing $1 every time you play the lottery is 100%. So, in terms of a business proposition, the lottery is the worst possible investment. And yet the reason that virtually every major state has a lottery is it generates billions of dollars in revenue by people who are regularly willing to lose money. He called it a tax on the stupid. And he said that's kind of a way of having an insight into crypto, in that whatever the evidence about crypto not being logical is, people want to apply form on the formless. They want to apply structure to the chaotic. And they want to believe there's order, even when there's no evidence of order. So they may think that because they pray, or because they're good people, or because they buy Ethereum on a Thursday, or because Donald Trump does this or that or the other, that there's going to be a causal reaction in the market and their particular investment is going to go up. And in that sense, they invest. And I thought that became symbolic to my mind of the way all of us collectively behave. And I created a character who we use a term in screenwriting called stakes, which is how much danger you put yourself in or a character puts themselves in, who plays a very high stakes gamble. He lies to his wife about their financial position. She says, "Are we in trouble?" He goes, "No, no, no. I know we got a foreclosure notice. That was a terrible mistake by the mortgage company. I must speak to them right away." But he realizes he's got about 7 hours to raise the money to pay off his house and decides to invest everything he has in a crypto play. The reason he's doing this is there's a famous film director named Steven Bernstein who is about to announce that he's going to make a movie called GRQ. And the coin is also called GRQ. And this coin is going to skyrocket because of this announcement, kind of based on Elon Musk going on Saturday Night Live. Do you remember? And so I appear in my own book as a key character, and he borrows from everybody: his mother, his daughter, his friends, people who are scary to borrow from, people he shouldn't borrow from, and invest everything in this play. Meanwhile, there's an earthquake, couple of earthquakes going in Los Angeles where he lives. His building that he's in is kind of collapsing around him. His wife is constantly questioning about what's going on, and he's watching this coin go up and down as all these different events occur around him. So it's about greed, it's about relationships, it's about our desire for epiphanal and magical success, and most of all, it's about the philosophic nature of blockchain and cryptocurrency.
I like it. Sounds really good. Sounds really good.
Thanks.
Yep. And I want to talk about that word stakes, because they're and danger, right? So it seems like, at least all the people who get notoriety in the industry or like get really well known end up in prison, you know? Um, Sam
No,
Bankman
no
Fried,
kidding.
no kidding. Sam Bankman Fried, BitBoy, some others I'm not going to name. But like, like, why is it best to like, for builders to operate, behind the scenes, working outside of the spotlight, but still making an impact?
That's a hugely important question. I researched this extensively as well because this guy does some things that are kind of criminal. He's dealing with some criminals or what we regard as criminals. You know, there's a thin line between being an iconoclast and being a criminal, a very thin line. And if you're going to be radical in thought, you have to be willing to violate the standard orthodoxies and say, I'm going to do things differently. The entire reason that crypto blockchain was invented really was for benevolent and large reasons of largesse. It was not meant to be a way to launder money. It was meant to stop the exploitation of ordinary people by banks and financial institutions. So I understand the history to be, and to this day, there's a lot of good and virtuous things being done with crypto, not least the one I just described in a way to revolutionize the film industry. But when you think of yourself as an iconoclast and think that rules have to be violated, sometimes you forget which rules are law and which rules are just cultural standards which can be altered or violated. So buying crypto is radical, but not illegal. Manipulating markets and doing pump and dumps is illegal. And there's a very thin line between that. So I think that for the iconoclasts, the revolutionary, the people who are really changing the world, they figured that part of being at the very edge of that brave frontier involves their ability to be radical in behavior. And I think they cross over the line into those things which are considered criminal. And that's the danger because a lot of this world, from my research at least, and you're way more expert, probably your listeners more expert than I, is not policed. And that's the good thing about it, because it's not policed by those who want to manipulate markets like banks for their advantage. But it's also not policed in terms of things that are simply moral and good. That these people were by their nature pernicious, but I just think the intellectual climate in which they inhabited led them to not understand the difference between radical and illegal.
Yeah, I agree. So I like that concept of being a little bit, unnormal, not as in abnormal, right? But it's also important, like, to touch on, like, how you can use creative policy and cultural entrepreneurship or uniqueness to reshape industries and entire economies. So how can you use that? How can you use that radicalness, that abnormality to help create a positive policy?
I think there's lots of ways. I think that this is one of the things I addressed earlier, which is we have to look at the virtues of crypto, and it really is the problem we have, separate from whatever your attitude is about government. But let's just look at my individual industry, which I'm expert, which is the film industry. At one time, there were seven and only seven major studios, and there was a famous thing called the Hayes Commission. And the Hayes Commission determined that studios were essentially monopolies because they had a cooperative behavior between them. And there's three different parts of filmmaking, which is the production, um, the distribution, and the exhibition. Production is making the films on a stage. We all know what production is. We've seen pictures of movies, or in my case, I've worked in movies. The distribution is it goes to a distributor, that's the one who takes your film, and then goes to different theaters around the country and says, do you want to show this movie? The distributor is like your middle person and your salesperson. And you need a distributor for your US domestic market, and you need them for international. And then you have the exhibitors. The exhibitors are the ones who show the film. That's your local multiplex theater, or that's your streamers or your television networks. Now, what the Hayes Commission said was there has to be a divestiture. To own all three parts of film, production, distribution, and exhibition, is a unfair business practice. And you can have two, but you can't have three. Now, that sounds virtuous and good. The problem was, of course, studios, having lots of good lawyers, found ways of working around it. There would be subsidiaries or people they cooperate with. And really, in the end, they would do a thing, for example, called block booking, which is they would go to a supposedly independent exhibitor and said, so you want this giant film that we have, this big tentpole movie? And they go, yeah, okay. To get your tentpole movie, you're also going to have to take six of our other films, which are not very good, and dogs. If you don't take them, and if you don't show them, and don't show them for 6 weeks, we're not going to give you our tentpole film. They had that sort of leverage because they owned the major distributors and they owned the source of production, and the exhibitors, who generally lose money, by the way, were completely reliant on the studios for their supply, so would bend to their will. And this was, problematic. Now, going back to exhibitors, the way exhibitors make their money, by the way, is in popcorn, just so you know. They will break even or lose money on the movie, but the popcorn is where their fortune comes from. So the great invention for exhibitors was the multiplex, because then you could concentrate your popcorn concessions with fewer employees, have seven movies showing, all of which were losing money, but then people would buy popcorn and you make a huge profit. So that's the way they would be set up, and that's how desperate they were. So that's not a good model for producers, independent producers like myself, for the exhibitors, and it's good for the studios, but really nobody else. So we have to find a way to re-engineer that. And then something else happened, which I mentioned before, the emergence of the streamers. When the streamers came out, something even worse happened is people stopped going to the movie theaters along with the pandemic. So now you have all these independent cinemas shutting down. And then people were wholly dependent on getting their product on streamers, which then themselves then pulled back on production. So now it became very difficult for an independent producer to make any money, because if you would go to the streamers, they, like the studios, had monopoly. You only had about four major streamers who would pay you only so much money. And with Netflix, they would buy you for a flat fee for the entire world. So you couldn't go and sell individual markets. You get one sum of money, and that was it. And rarely with that sum of money, unless you had a very successful movie that had already shown in the cinemas, and I told you about the problems with those, to make money making your movie. Now, that's why blockchain is so significant right now and so revolutionary for this marketplace, to give independent filmmakers the opportunity to actually share directly in the revenue, completely bypassing the distributors, and therefore really working in concert with exhibitors and saying to exhibitors, we'll send you what we call DCP, which is the print of the film. You show it. and your revenue will be reported. And whatever piece of that blockchain we have, let's say it's 10% of every screening, we get, and it appears instantly in our account. And so you also have a cash flow thing to your advantage, because, by the way, the other thing that happens with studios is you might not see your revenue for 2 years after the revenue comes in a particular quarter. This is a very, very dramatic change. It's been slow to be adapted. Um, and this is interesting. And this is to do with the cost of films to make. Films are very expensive to make. And therefore, the industry becomes very conservative because no one wants to take a risk. Because if you take a risk and fail, you're going to fail spectacularly. So even though the model is obvious to many of us, even though you speak to most of the industry thought leaders, they all think blockchain is the future. It's not been widely adopted yet. The other obvious direction to go is to have a streaming platform with pay-per-view that uses blockchain, that people can pay with cryptocurrency. And I'm surprised there's a couple that have tried it, but very, very few. And I am certain that that is the future, but it's going to take a while to convince a conservative, frightened industry to adapt these new methods. But I don't see any other way forward for independent producers and production companies except this, and if they don't adopt it soon, they're going to die.
Yeah. You would think at the beginning when I got into crypto, you would think that the obvious avenue and most easy for cryptocurrencies is payments, and it has been the hardest, been the most difficult because we just had a stablecoin bill, the Genius Act in the U.S., but you have other cryptos that were supposed to be used as payments, like Bitcoin, that I would never use as a payment. So it's still an adopting area. But you know, personally, I like the idea of going to an AMC theater or other theater and eating the popcorn there instead of putting popcorn in the microwave in my house. That's
Yeah.
just me. you know,
And no, and also the joy of watching a film with other people around you is fantastic. But I think it's very important you mentioned stablecoin, because, of course, the other dynamic that people were concerned about was how volatile some crypto was, and that you start a production, and then suddenly the prices change dramatically, and you're seeing the revenue. But the great thing about stablecoin, which is linked to, say, a currency, is the movement isn't as great, and it's like the old bond market. So I think there's still a great opportunity for both stability and a radical alteration of the industry.
yeah. So let's say, for example, you are successful in this venture, and I hope you are, and I would love to see it, and I hope everything goes off this plan. You sir have a name in the industry. You have a curriculum vitae. You have a resume. You have a long. There are 7,000, like you said, 7,000 applicants to Sundance this past year who don't have your name. How can those small micro creators get a get it like get recognized? How can they be able to do it if everything works as planned? How will they be able to adopt and adapt what you've created to help themselves?
Well, it's a couple of ways. You know, people are so uh, conservative again and inclined to use the existing models. You have to alter that model, and one of the alternates is something called four-walling. And it's underutilized. It was popular in the 60s, and there's a couple of companies that do it now, but not as much as they should do. And this four-walling is very simple. Again, you bypass the distributors and you distribute yourself. You do it like you're a pop band, and you contact some local theaters, and you say to the theater, I want to show my film there. And they say, well, our overhead is X amount. And if you are willing to cover our overhead, going back to they're going to be making their money on the popcorn anyway, all they have to do is make sure the theater's about a third full. So you guarantee that they'll have a revenue for a third full audience. You pay that in advance, and you rent the theater for an afternoon or a night. I know that sounds crazy, but there's one company called Gather. There's a couple other companies can do it, or you can do it yourself. And you go city by city. And now, because the marketing has become much easier than it was, say, 20 years ago, now you can do your marketing on the internet. You can do it on Instagram. You can do it on TikTok. You can do it on Facebook. You can do it on Reddit. You can do it on LinkedIn. And you announce to a local locality that your film's going to be shown at this time and this date, for this amount of money. You say to the theater you're going to be paying them their overhead. which is surprisingly low because, again, they just got to get seats, bumps on seats and eyes on screens. And then you show your film for that night. Your cost, internet marketing is not huge. It's not like you're buying television campaigns. You're buying internet space, and you're buying internet space directed at local markets. And then you go to a second city and a third city and a fourth city. And then you make revenue. It's slow, it's labor intensive, but the combination of the internet and the four-walling directly to the cinema and eliminating the distributor means the distributor doesn't get their cut, which means you get more revenue. Now, in terms of payment, of course, we know how you're going to be paid. You're going to be paid in crypto. You're going to be paid on the crypto markets. You're going to be paid in cash. You're not going to have to wait for a revenue report. It's going to be directly linked to the box office, directly to your wallet. And that's the way you'll be paid. And that could be facilitated. So no one can cheat you if it's set up correctly. It's fair to the theater. It's fair to you. It's not labor intensive because you've got no middleman. There's no accounting. There's no auditing. You simply have that revenue coming back. Now, if you want to expand that model, companies like Gather can help you. And that rather than you having to go city by city individually, you can hire what's called like precinct captains in 20 or 30 or 40 cities, people who want to support your film or maybe taking part of the revenue. And then you show the film in 40 separate cities, in 40 separate places where you rent cinemas, and in 40 cases whereby you are getting that revenue for the theaters in exchange for paying their bare overhead minimums to make sure that that theater is available to you on that day or that night or for that week. And again, rather than having to audit each one individually or rely on trust, everything is passed directly from box office into your wallet, and the revenue comes back without having to pay for a middleman. It's a radical model, but it is available. It's not widely publicized, but it's something that independent producers can do. Separate from that, of course, go to every film festival you can, get people to see your film. If you go to a film festival and a distributor, the old model, sees your film and likes it, they will purchase it from you. They'll purchase it for upfront money, again, a minimum guarantee, and then they'll show it within their network or their area or in their territory. And that upfront money may be the only money you ever get, but it's better than not getting any money at all, which is what the majority of those 7,000 filmmakers got who submitted to Sundance.
Yeah. And none of it is get rich quick. It's all takes work, effort, dedication, and creative risk taking, right? So why is that doing the things the hard way? Not the hard way, but the way that does require dopamine, the risk taking. Why is that very important today in the digital economy and growing cultural digital economies?
You hit the nail on the head when you talked about risk. You see, we have finite resources, and one of the finite resources we have is time and attention. So if we decide to go the slow, hard-working way, that requires a huge application of our time and a huge application of our attention, for which there is no certain reward. The average independent film takes 7 years from inception to production. And 90% of those films, even after they're made, fail. Let me read that back to you. 90% of films fail. 90% of independent productions take 7 years to make. So when you sit down and decide to make a film, and you're going to invest 7 years of your life and then have it get released and make no money, that's a huge risk. Those are high stakes. Now, if you go to your corner liquor store and buy a lottery ticket, it takes you about 7.5 minutes, and your total investment is $1, for which recently in California, you could have won $1.2 billion before tax. One requires a huge risk, and it's not the lottery. The lottery is a small risk, even though your odds, the big risk is the investment of your time. So the reason, as my book conjectures, and my book's a fictional, although my wife insists the main character is just like me, taking wild risks, and when she wants to get me really annoyed, she calls me the name of the character because I'm taking huge risks. But if you don't want to take risks, then you do something that requires small investment, even though your likelihood of return is very, very small, like a lottery ticket. And to my mind, crypto is like a lottery ticket because people generally are not investing millions of dollars, nor are they waiting 7 years of hard work to see their money back. They're just putting some money in a wallet, they're buying some crypto, and then probably 3 times a day, 5 times a day, they're checking the price of, whatever it is, and seeing whether it's going up or down. And that's easy. As you rightly say, it's a wiser and more mature investment to do that hard labor. But when the hard labor in independent film has no guarantee reward, you can see why people want to get rich quick. Because if you're not getting rich quick, you may just be spending a lot of time getting nothing at all. So at least you know instantly whether you're going to get that reward and gratification. Going to a horse race, you only have to wait for the race to start to finish before you get that gratification. The reason people are obsessed with sports is that gratification, which really has no relationship to person's lives. If you support the Buffalo Bills and they win the Super Bowl this year, I promise you that your life is not going to change after the Bills win the Super Bowl. Josh Allen's life may change. Some other, players' lives may change, but they don't even know your name. You may wear the shirt and have bragging rights at your local bar, but your life is not going to change. And yet, how much do people invest emotionally in sports? And there's a reason for that, because they get not money, but they get reward every time that team wins. And their investment, again, no investment, no 7 years of work. All they have to do is say, I'm going to support the Buffalo Bills, and I'm going to watch them this Sunday, and they're going to play the New Orleans Saints, and they're going to win by 40 points, whatever it is. And now I feel triumphant. Why do you feel triumphant? What work did you invest in? What money, what time, what of yourself did you put in this? Nothing at all. And in that sense, you're getting emotionally rich quick instantly from that gratification. The idea, as you wisely put it, of people investing into slow, hard work is a very difficult one when there's no guarantee reward.
Yeah, I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I've been a Philly fan since the mid 1980s. I put a lot of emotional capital into watching some really bad teams over the years. It happen to be really good now, but like if the Bills played the Eagles, I wouldn't be disappointed or upset if the Bills won because they've lost so many years. So well,
We're getting into a very delicate area because I've supported that team for a long time, including the 4 Super Bowl losses. And I would painfully smile when say, "How do you spell Bills?" Bills. Very, very painful. So I understand that, but I also realize how illogical it is for me to support any team because they're not part of my creative process. What I should be supporting is my movies, and I guess that's where I'm going right now. But it's I still watch every Sunday.
sounds good. So do I. Sounds good to me. So I want to thank you very much for your time today. This has been a wonderful conversation. I enjoyed speaking with you. I have one last question. How can people find out more information about you? How can they, see all your work? How can they get all the information in one spot? How can they do that?
Well, first, obviously, because the book is this phenomena, and I can't say it's like you talk about investment. So I wrote the book pretty quickly, and then modified it, and then I was surprised that my agent was so excited about it, surprised the publisher was excited about it, and then amazed when we won the Literary Titan Award, amazed when I think we had all 5-star reviews on Amazon. It was like, you know how when you do something, you dream about what it will be like when it succeeds. And then when it's happening, you're so disassociated, it doesn't seem real. So right now, I'm on this unreal sleigh ride that everyone's asking to speak to me about this book. Of course, it's been made into a film now, and people are loving it. Galen Hurd, who produced Terminator and The Abyss and Aliens and The Walking Dead, one of the most famous producers in the world, read the book and said it's one of the best books she's ever read. So, and that's on the cover of her book now. So for me, that's kind of a huge validation. So first of all, I'd love people to go to Amazon and pick up the book and then review it and tell me what you think of it. And it's in all good bookstores. It's everywhere, and it's called GRQ. And then I've got an Instagram page called Stephen Bernstein, Director Writer, where because I've had good fortune, I want to give back, like I am, I hope, this afternoon. And I talk about all things film, the creative process, about writing, about directing, about casting actors, about acting itself, about the film business. And I do a little curated insight each day, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes. and that's Steve Bernstein, director writer on Instagram. And then finally, we do a podcast with Vince Grimes, who was the creative director at Google, so knows a lot about creative process. And we talk about the creative side of filmmaking once a week, and we analyze a film or we analyze some trend in the industry. And we got lots of people listening to that, and they can tune in there as well. So those are the different places you can find the tragedy of Steve Bernstein.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
My great pleasure. What a delight speaking to you. Thank you so much.